Look at this verse, Romans 12:2. And while you go there, I'm going to talk to you about a funny little story about me and my life. How many people ever played Little League Baseball? Anyone? How many people actually enjoyed it? I did. How many people went through, you started at minors, then you went to majors, and around here, then you went to junior Babe, and then you went to Babe Ruth League, and at least that's our local leagues. Well, I remember in a majors, I wasn't a junior Babe yet, I was like a major leaguer, which means, I think that meant like you got to pitch to each other. You didn't have to have the coach pitch. I don't even remember, something like that. I just remember I was supposed to be pitching, and it was a playoff game. And I remember being so stressed because I wasn't a pitcher, I was a catcher. But they needed me to pitch, and so I'm kind of like, I'm getting all stressed out. And my teammates are all putting this pressure on me, like, dude, we got to win this, man. You can't stink, man. Go out there and do it right. I'm sitting there thinking, I'm not even a pitcher. I'm freaking out, and I'm freaking out. And then, like, of course, it's like the biggest game against the biggest team, and I'm kind of like, how did I end up on the mound kind of thing, But one of the things I remembered before I went out there, because I was obviously noticeably stressed, one of the things is, like, before I got on the field, my dad just kind of looked over, and he was like, take a deep breath. And I was like, I'm like 10, 12 years old trying to be cool. I don't know, I'm like, and my dad's like, just calm down. Just go out and do your best. You're not a pitcher, but you can pitch. So go out and do your best, and tomorrow's going to come either way. I kind of thought, I'm going to eat my cereal tomorrow morning either way. Those Lucky Charms with those marshmallows are still going to be waiting for me. And it was like this huge sense of relief. And I went out and I actually did well, and we won the game. I wouldn't say it was because of me, but I did well. But I wonder if I would have done well if I walked out with all that pressure on me, if I walked out with all that stress on me. And I kind of think that God's saying, hey, I made you free. Stop living in the world's expectations. Stop living with the stress that they put on you. I called you by my name, and I have a plan, and I have a purpose for you, and as long as you do your best, I'm going to do the rest. I really believe that. And when you start to look at that kind of freedom, when you start to understand that God really does care about you and that he's not going to leave you hanging to dry, that he wants you to do these things and that he's called you to them, man, that's a totally different world. Romans 12:2. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So many people have heard that so many times. But we still conform to the way the world thinks. We still worry about what the world worries about. Have you ever thought if Jesus was back, if he was here, you know what I mean? Look who's back, look who's back. If Jesus was here right now and he walked through the church, what would matter and what wouldn't matter? Did you ever think of that? You get into the book of Isaiah, and Isaiah is talking to the church, and he says, I'm sick of all your show. I'm sick of the hypocrisy. I'm sick of the praisey, clappy songs, because at some point, they lost the potency of why they were there. And I believe that God wants us to live free and make change. Because at the end of the day, isn't that what Jesus called us to do with the Great Commission? Go into all the world. I believe he wanted us to go in and infect change. And so I look at this and I go, God, how can I change the world more for you? And he starts saying, care less about what the world says and do what I've called you to do. Be free. Be free. So number one, be free and live outside of the world's expectations. Number two, God is saying, here's a concept. You're free to live inside my provision. You're free to live inside of my provision. You realize God, he's the Jehovah Jireh. He's the God. He's our provider. You read Matthew, in the book of Matthew, Jesus is saying, hey, look at the birds of the air. Look at the beasts of the field. They don't till the ground. They don't even work day in and day out. But yet God cares for them. How much more does he care for you, his son and daughter? Don't worry about what you're going to wear. Don't worry about the things of this world, because God wants you to do what he's called you to do. And so he's going to provide for you to do what he's called you to do. Have you ever heard this saying? If it's God's will, it's God's bill. If it's God's will, if he wants you to do it, he's going to pay the way for you to do it. And I think he's already laid the groundwork and paid for us to do what we're doing here right now. You know? I was watching TV last night, and I don't normally watch this TV show. I think it breaks some sort of guy code or man code. But I was flipping late at night, and it was like George Lopez. You guys ever see that guy? He's coming out with his own late night show. He's actually really funny. And so I admitted it's on YouTube now. I'm sure. Awkward. Anyway, so the TV show is about his daughter wants to do something. She's 15 years old. She wants to paint her room, something, crazy. I don't know. And he's kind of like, no, this is my house, and this is how we do things. And, I'm your father. I'm not your landlord. So she says, fine, I'll start paying rent. He's like, yeah, we'll see how long this lasts. Okay. $300. So she starts getting a second job, and she's 15 years old, and she's working school, and she's just really doing everything she can to show it to her father that she can do it on her own, and before you know it, before the end of the show, she's picking food out of the trash because he said, wait a minute, you don't eat our groceries anymore. You're not my daughter, remember? I'm your landlord. I'm your neighbor. So, okay, fine, do your own thing, you know what I mean? And so what happens is, by the end of the show, she's just coming back to her father and was like, I'm sorry, I messed up, and, I need you. And he was there with open arms saying, I wanted to provide for you. I think sometimes we're just too stubborn to allow our Father to provide for us. I think sometimes we're too stubborn to say, you know what, God? I trust you, and I'll let you provide for me. Instead, we think we need to do it on our own. We need to show him, wait a minute, no, I'm empowered. Now I can do it. And God's saying, you're going to burn yourself out. I never called you to do that. That's under my responsibility. I am supposed to be your provision. I am supposed to be your shelter, your strong tower, your fortress. I'm supposed to be the one that provides for you. Man, if only we could understand the freedom of letting God be God and do what we were called to do. Man, if we weren't worried about our mortgage or about our rent, because we knew as long as I do everything I can do, God's going to show up. As long as I give my tithes and my offering, I'm going to be blessed. As long as I position myself to be blessable, God's going to do his part. I really believe that. I just don't think we live it. I really don't. Flip to Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 30. That when I watched that TV show, obviously it reminds you of the prodigal son. I'm not going there, but I'm just going to talk to you about him for a minute. Remember the prodigal son? He asked for his inheritance early, took it and left and went and lived it up, did everything he ever wanted to do. One day he found himself in a pig's pen, eating with the pigs, and realized, what did I do? And he came back to his father, and his father was like, where have you been forever? And instead of saying, you should have known better, his father opened his arms and said, man, I was supposed to provide for you. Come back. I love you. I feel like we always think that we have to do everything when God's still willing to just open his arms and say, let me be God. Man, that's freeing, isn't it? Deuteronomy 30 says this, 15 and 16. See, I set before you today life and prosperity, death and destruction. For I command you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, and to keep his commands, decrees, and laws. Then you will live and increase. Who wants to live and increase? There's something about living, but there's something about increasing. He doesn't want you just to survive. He doesn't want you just to make enough food on the table. Sometimes what we call as blessing, God is saying, no, that was the last stage. I'm calling you to better things. He wants you to increase. Sometimes the things, and I'm not telling you it's not a blessing to be able to pay your bills. That's a blessing. But he wants you to be able to be banking. He wants you to be increasing. He said, I called you to be the head, not the tail. I called you to be above, not beneath. Start living up here. Start putting your trust back in him and start living in that freedom. That's what he's calling us to. And then he says, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land you are entering to possess. How many know the prayer Jabez where it's about, God, make large my territory.